What's up to all of my podcast peeps out in these social media streets? I am Danielle, your podcast bestie. And as a matter of fact, let me go ahead and turn on my light. I didn't want it to distract the camera that I have on beside me. But this is your podcast weekly briefing. I am a podcast strategist, mentor, coach. I help podcasters such as yourself to elevate in this podcasting space by bringing you news in real time, providing you with the tips, and especially giving shout outs where we have a growing, thriving community within Facebook. So if you find Plan to Podcast, the group, you're more than welcome to join us. We invite you for accountability. We invite you so that we can audit your podcast. If you need a community where you can ask questions and direct your questions to people who are in the same position as you, indie podcasters, introverted podcasters who are looking to elevate their podcast, step out from behind the mic, be more front facing, then certainly you want to join Plan to Podcast. There's a reason behind the name. First and foremost, plan, because I think that's the first thing you should do when you decide you want to start a podcast, is you need to have a clear plan, a roadmap that's going to help you get from point A to point B. And then plan, if you never heard the adage, if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. You need something to keep you afloat when you hit those stagnant points in your podcast journey, when the listener audience growth is no longer there, when you've run out of ideas. There's a plan that can help keep you afloat. And then plan because if you want to do anything well, you need to start with a plan. So there's like all coming down to the importance of planning if you want to have long-term success. And so that's why we talk about planning out your podcast. Again, you can find us plantopodcast.com. There should be a ticker down below that tells you how to get in touch with us. This is going to be very quick. I was running behind schedule because I was taking a vibe code training, which I really love. And I can share more about that after the experience. But if you have not already thought about building your own app or building your own website and platform that is helping you with lead gen, that is helping you convert your client or customer, that is helping you earn additional income, then you certainly need to be connected with some form of Lovable or vibe code platform. Lovable is a platform that I use. But in this very short segment, we're going to go through a podcast tip, go through podcast reaction videos, give you a podcast vocab term, and some community shout outs. Like I said, we have a thriving community on Facebook that I want you all to know about. So we're going to get into it. First and foremost, shout out to all of our newest members. So our new members within community, we want to give them a shout out. I do want to thank first and foremost my admin team or moderators. So we have DC, we have not DC Young Fly, but we have DC. We have Mahogany, we have Micah, we have Jonathan, we have Marquise, and we have our resident podcast editor. So if you need editing, again, we know where to connect you to. So those are the members of my team. Not to be remiss, we're adding one more person for Tuesday. You can find all of them on our website, plantopodcast.com. Again, the ticker below. But for all of our new members, we have a new post that goes out every Tuesday in the group to welcome our new members. But as of late, Brittany Holmes, Denise Royal, Diary of D'Angela, Chrissy, Sherwana, Jasmine, Lamar, Hugo, Daryl, Lisa, Quan, Martin, William, Tanvar, Selena, Robert, Nazmul, Casanita, Martin, Jennifer, and Lisa, Steve, Roxanne, Guy, Kevin, Fidos, Casey, Spark a Conversation, Jody, Janet, David, The Spark Studios, Lauren, Daniel, Rhea, Ariel, Jessica, Eli, Sharon, Pam, Kate. I can go on and on and on, but every week we try to give them a special shout out. Welcome to all of our new members. We're so happy that you decided to join our community. Our community is different in the sense that it's not just a place where you can drop your podcast link. However, it is a place where you can get real support, real feedback. Yes, you can share your podcast links, but also you can be a part of our growing ecosystem where we have different touch points no matter where you are on your podcast journey. After the welcome, we want to, of course, give a special shout out to our most valuable podcaster of the group. So our most valuable podcaster of the group this week is our moderator, Mahogany. She is so intentional about the questions that she asks. She's so intentional about engaging with every one of our members. And so we want to say thank you to our MVP, our most valuable podcaster. And again, you guys can get featured on our website. You guys can get these special shout outs. We help amplify your voice. We do podcast audits. We provide a surplus of podcast resources, and we have different membership tiers depending on what you're looking for, whether you want practice public speaking or if you want study sessions together. We have something for everyone, so never hesitate to reach out. plantopodcast.com. Okay, now let's get into podcast word of the day. Every podcast briefing, we try to give you a word of the day to help expand your knowledge base and your vocabulary and learn some of these technical terms. And so the word of the day today is RSS. Some of you are familiar, some of you are not. Real Simple Syndication is a special web link that automatically delivers your podcast episodes to apps like Spotify and Apple so people can listen. Another way that I like to frame it is RSS, Real Simple Syndication, meaning just like we have our individual fingerprint, your podcast has its own fingerprint that's only connected and can be traced through your hyperlink. And so this is what you share to move your podcast from one platform to another, and then to also help distribute your podcast content to the various platforms as aforementioned. A simple web link that automatically delivers your podcast episodes to apps like Spotify, Apple, Amazon Music, Google. You know, there are so many, YouTube. They go on and on and on and on. All right. Next, I'm going to do a few quick reaction videos so you know what I'm paying close attention to, some of the platforms that I like to frequent, that I get my updates and news from. Then we're going to go into a podcast tip and very quickly brush over our podcast topic. Again, you can always find us live on Mondays, 1:00 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, tentatively speaking, because I was so engrossed in that webinar today at 1 that it kind of crossed over into what I'm doing now. So I told you guys I'm going to share with you some podcast clips. Now, I love Emma Grade. She's responsible for her partnership with the Spanx and the Kardashians. She's also responsible for, I think, American Genes with Khloe Kardashian, Spanx Kim Kardashian. She's been featured on Shark Tank. So that's where I first discovered her. Before I cared anything about Spanx, because I don't wear them. I don't need them, no judgment, but I'm a petite person. So it's not that I was introduced through her by way of her brand, but it was her business acumen and what she displayed on Shark Tank. So I was watching that. And then I was also watching, if you guys know about, what was the other one from? I think Brendan Boyd. He's another podcaster in the space. I really value a lot of what he talks about. And at one of his webinars at one point, gleaned a lot of information from him. I will say I try not to lean too much on like what everyone is doing per se, but I like to listen to people just to kind of like do a temperature check and make sure that I'm on track with the ideas and the things that I plan on doing for my platform, for my community. So Brendan Boyd was one of those people that I followed earlier on took one of his webinars and have been following him ever since. And then it's blanking, but I do have a third clip. But let's just go ahead and quickly share these clips here. So I'm going to be sharing my screen. So some patience for me as I prepare to do that. And this is Quinta Prem is her platform. And what we're sharing here in this particular clip is about the importance of auditing yourself and why starting a podcast makes sense. If you are a person who has a brand, a product or service, you're looking for a marketing funnel, you're looking for strategy to nurture your relationships, or you're looking for a way to find your ideal client, all of that can be done and achieved through podcasting. So we're going to listen to this quick clip. And then again, bear with me as I prepare to share my screen.
We grab our phones all day, every day. So why not use it to become better? And 100%. Then I would download those Instagram reels or those Instagram lives, and I would either turn it into reels or I would use it to audit myself. Like, ooh, I wish I would have said this, or maybe I was talking too fast, or next time I probably should insert this, or next time I should drop my link, different things that I could do to make myself better. And I think that's what it is. But once I started the podcast, I started doing the same thing. Yeah. I would take my episodes and watch them and figure out what I should do to make myself better.
And most people don't do that. They don't watch the tape.
Yeah, I watch the tape. I still watch the tape. Like, oh, I should have said this, or I shouldn't have said that, or maybe I should have asked the guest this so I know what to do and what to insert next time.
Yeah, for sure.
So what's your take on, everybody feels like, oh, I have a good message, or I'm really good at talking, or I should start a podcast. When do I know if I should start? Should I start a podcast? And when do I know if I should and if podcasting is for me?
So
something that we use, we grab our phones.
So what he said was, which got cut off, reasons you should start a podcast. The reason why he decided to start that was Brendan Boyd. He started his podcast because he wanted to expand his knowledge on topics as someone who's coming from the real estate industry. And so he wanted to interview those people and then turn those people into potential clients. So his approach was working with said individuals to make sure that, he's learning, he's staying on top of industry trends, but then also he can convert those same people who showed up on the podcast and then convert them to clients. Maybe they know a lot about real estate, but maybe they don't know much about podcasting. So then he's able to offer them his services by having them on the platform. So podcasting for him was a lead funnel. And then going back to what she said, it's so important to go back and audit yourself, even though it might feel cringy, even though it might, let me say that again, so you guys hear me loud and clear. Even though it might feel cringy, even though it is hard to go back and listen to yourself and watch yourself, the greats study the tape. Let me repeat, the greats study the tape. So you definitely need to be going back and doing an audit of yourself. And she explains that she'll record the content, maybe not have it public and front facing to everyone else, but she can go back, even if it's like a YouTube unlisted video, go back and watch it and see where she was speaking too quickly, where she could have expounded more. And so always doing an audit of oneself is key if you are looking for growth in this industry. If you're looking for podcast growth, the best way you can achieve that is going back and studying the tape. No matter how cringy it might feel in the moment, it's actually necessary for your success. All right, so the next clip that I'm going to share, and again, it's a little bit out of sorts, so forgive me. Okay. So let's share again. All right, so this was on Omar, and this was Jasmine Star, who I think is a beast. And what I love about what she shares is Everyone else might be looking into systems and they might be looking into all of these other things, but she's looking into what the customer is saying, speaking directly to the customer, building a rapport with her client and her customer. In this case, as a podcaster, it might be your audience. Going back and hearing from them firsthand so you understand where you can make changes, where you should make adjustments, and move accordingly. So, and I think it's also front facing, like not hiding behind the mic, but coming from behind the mic to build the relationship if you want to see growth. All right, here we go. You guys are seeing my kids' stuff on the side too.
The foundation of the program, of the marketing. But how did we know that? By being in the DMs. Okay. And so for me, yes, I'm in it because it's ROI positive all day, every day. Now, if I was starting and I didn't have a following, I would still be doing the same thing. You just got to be human. You want to be the person like Main Street USA, like you're sweeping the front of your shop. There goes Jasmine. You want to be in the mall and you want to be passing out like, free samples of the chocolate. There goes Jasmine. You want to be at the cocktail party, the person who grabs like the cocktail tray and be like, you're moving too slow. Here you go. Like the Latina at every party, it's like, eat some more. Like be that person on the internet and people will begin to trust that you see them. And the minute you see them, they're going to trust that your solution, even though you have 1,000 competitors in a very saturated marketplace, that you're going to be their solution. And that's only for seeing them and being human.
So good. Conversations. It's a crazy perpetual cycle that when you...
The foundation of the program, of the marketing. But how did we know that? Okay. By being in the DMs. Okay. And so for me...
So yeah, like you're not going to... A lot of people get this question wrong. And it's how do I scale my podcast? Yeah, there's systems out there that help keep everything afloat and operational for you. But if you are not touching the people, shaking hands with the people, hearing from the people about their direct needs and then trying to meet that need, then they're going to find somebody else who is more front facing. Like they're going to find the platform where people are showing up. Founders like at Podmatch, I see the founders over there that are front facing. You got the Alex Mahoney's, his last name, the pronunciation of his last name is messing me up right now. But those guys, even though they're founders, even though they're making millions of dollars, they're still in the trenches with their customer base and they're still learning from their customers and they're still, coming up from behind the system and showing their face. And I think that's key. Last clip. And then we're going to get into some podcast news. This one is the Emma with interviewing Issa Rae. What I love about this clip is because Issa Rae, even though she's a millionaire, on track probably to make billions because she, is a digital media company. She does film and all of those things, and she's an actress. And so she's making money in several different ways. And so I don't know how much she's earning, but I do know that no matter where you are on your journey, we all still have some of the same problems. And her problem, which I appreciate, is like you're working in the business, you're working on the thing, but you still have to be forward thinking and you still have to be thinking about what's next. And sometimes that loop can kind of run its toll because you're constantly thinking about what's next. It's hard to appreciate the now. So I just appreciate the transparency. And that's a reminder for us as podcasters, like that's going to happen. For me, it's like getting ahead of the learning curves, learning AI, still showing up to do the podcast, still working with all of you who need help with your podcast and you need my services, well, whether a full suite of services or a la carte, whatever. Still showing up and trying to be ahead of the curve, thinking about 5-10 years from now. It is a space that any entrepreneur will often find themselves in. And it's just good to find what works for you to keep your mind at ease when you are feeling like you're in the shuffle.
Stuck in one place. Like I love creating. Like that is what I love the most. But I also always wanted a coffee shop. I also love the restaurant industry. I love to eat. I love to serve. I love these things. So these are like passion projects for me. And to your point, I wanted to leverage the opportunity to work with people I'm fans of, to collaborate with them, to make these other passion projects or side quests work. And yeah, it was just a matter of like not trying to limit myself and making sure that it makes sense, that like my main business could support the other businesses.
Yeah,
otherwise, nothing works. And
I love that. So like the podcast is supposed to be the podcast is the main thing. And the podcast is supposed to be what supports whatever comes next. And then you having these different collaborations with your guests who are featured on your podcast. And then how can you take it a step further besides collaborating with one another, but like doing business with each other? And so podcasting, again, opens up all of these avenues, but it's also like constantly thinking about the what's next, what more can I be doing, and all of those things as well. All right, let's get into some of this podcast news that we need to be mindful of. So this is related to the Epstein files. Some of you guys are plugged in, some of you guys are not. I know I've learned a lot in just these past 2 or 3 weeks. So this comes from a podnews.net article. If you haven't been following Pod News, my recommendation is add them to your bookmark on your computer. So there is no suggestion that appearing in the documents implies any wrongdoing, but what so far do we know about Jeffrey Epstein's connection into podcasting? We know he listened, possibly from the unergonomic desk pictured above, but what else do we know? Lawrence Cross, a former astronomy professor and host of the Origins podcast with Lawrence Cross, spoke repeatedly with Epstein about his podcast in January 2019, asking for money, which Epstein was happy to give until he seemed to withdraw, worried about conflict between the podcast and its foundation. And at one point in 2017, Epstein asks, "How do we get onto the Joe Rogan show? Can you introduce me? I think he's funny." He says Rogan didn't reply. And in a news report, Rogan says he declined. So if you haven't been paying attention, I've learned a lot just like in this past week or two. The picture company that was taking all of our kids' pictures at school, they have been listed in the Epstein files. So things that you should pay attention to. I just thought it was a special thing to note, like even in podcasting, how things kind of make its way onto the platform and how it becomes news, and specifically how it becomes a part of podcasting news. And another thing I wanted to share. So have you guys been at the gas station and you've seen these short videos? I think this is smart. I've always been curious, like, how do I get advertised on there? Not so much with my podcast, but thinking about how I can advertise other product or services. I know for like my platform, Host City Hustle, with all of the FIFA traction that's going to be coming through, I thought about this. So to see them kind of starting to make headway and become more popular to everyone was kind of intriguing. So filling up with the fuel is now a great place to also learn more about a new podcast. Purple Daily, a Minnesota Vikings podcast from Guamat Podcast Network, will now accompany you as you fill up your car at regional gas stations. Quick trip in the area. As you fill up, you get a 30-second taster on the gas pump. So very cool. Look into it if you don't already know. And then the last one about Supercast. So they've been acquired by another company, and let's look into it. So the Supercast tool has been acquired. It says Red Seat Ventures acquires leading podcast subscription platform Supercast. Red Seat is a division of Fox Network. So if you guys are not paying attention to the monopoly happening in media, you have a lot of people in high places who are monopolizing, even like the Jeff Bezos of the world. who's buying up these networks and trying to control what we see. I hope you guys are paying attention. I hope you're covering it on your podcast. If there's any direct correlation, find a way to talk about these things and keep this important news circulating from our point of view. But the acquisition expands Red Seat Ventures' creator-focused digital services portfolio, giving creators a single partner for advertising and subscription, and unifying the two primary revenue streams for podcast business. So that is Supercast, Supercast. So if you don't know about that app, go take a look and get more information. So yeah, we covered the acquisition, we've covered pay at the pumps and the Epstein files. Let's get into our podcast tip of the day. So your podcast tip is basically things that I recommend that you do for growth in your podcast. We gave you a vocabulary word. We gave you some news, some clips and some news. Optimize one episode today using PodSEO. So I've been using it for the past month, and I get a weekly debrief of how I've appeared in the SEO across platforms, and it's so helpful. So use it to generate a strong episode title, a key-rich description, and searchable tags or keywords. Step 2, apply it in one past episode, not 10, not doing it and holding off until someday it happens, but pick one episode today, maybe the most viewed episode so far. And step 3, reshare that optimized episode, post it like it's brand new. I just refreshed this episode for anyone who missed it for the first time. Now, why this matters. Most podcasters think they need more content when what they really need is better discoverability. I've seen an uptick, even like my ebook that's listed on Amazon. I see how people are searching that with PodSEO. PodSEO. If you don't know, now you know. All right, now let's get into very quickly this mindset of a podcaster topic. All right, so to stay in podcasting long-term, you need 3 things. You need emotional endurance, meaning growth is slow until it suddenly isn't. So you need to be able to keep the stamina during the ebb and flow of your podcast journey. There won't be a lot of times where it's going to be just like this. It's going to normally be like this. That's going to be in your analytics. That's going to be in the different episodes that you put out. If it's evergreen content, sometimes you won't see a spike until 1 year later. That's another thing that I learned, in my research and development journey. Evergreen content is something that for whatever reason can be like at 4,000 views for the first year. And then after a year, 100,000 views, because that's what becomes popular at the time. So you want to build up the emotional endurance for, hey, let me just remain consistent because this journey is going to have a lot of ebb and flow. Build up the stamina. 2, identity clarity. You're not trying podcasting, you're becoming a trusted voice. So showing up consistently and building the rapport with your audience. 3, purpose bigger than numbers. It shouldn't be, because you know that there is ebb and flow, your goal should not be, I want to see 500 plus downloads. Are those even downloads that convert to anything? What I learned yesterday listening to Brendan Boyd, he was saying that for, like YouTube, a view is simply someone watching your video for 15 to 30 seconds. That's not a long time. Yet many of us count it as a notch in our belt, thinking that it means something, like it's something we can hang our hat on, when really it doesn't mean anything. The goal is to get those numbers to convert into buying a product or a service from you. So the goal should not be about the numbers, because again, there's a lot of ebb and flows. It should be, what are you building? What problem are you solving? And it should be more purposeful. I was going to try to come up with another word, but I don't need to. More purposeful, more intentional. If downloads are your only motivation, you'll quit when things are low. If impact is your motivation, you'll keep going, even until the numbers rise. And when you pair your mindset with real action, like optimizing your episodes so people can actually find you, that's when confidence becomes real, not imagined, not motivational, but real. All right, so that is our weekly podcast briefing. I do want to tell you that this week we are recording episodes. Last week we wrapped a week of panels. The week before that, we did a podcast launch sprint, so getting your podcast launched in 5 days. And then next week is going to be Podcast Spirit Week, so we have those listed on Luma. They'll also go up on our website, I think midweek, so Wednesday of this week. But if you have any questions, if you need any support with your podcast, never hesitate to reach out. Again, we are plantopodcast.com. You see the ticker, you know where to find us. I'm DaniMarie, your podcast coach, bestie, and mentor. All things podcasting. We're so happy for each and every one of you who jump into podcasting at whatever you time and space, but you see that as a viable option to promote your product, resources, your brand, your services. Catch us next week, Monday, 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Bye.